The Five Bloods. Spike Lee's at it again. What can I say about this movie? It's a long movie, over 2.5 hours. And I tell you what, Spike Lee I feel he's a talented director. I'll give him that. I think he knows how to craft a movie. Nice cinematography. He gets good acting performances out of his actors. He makes entertaining, well-paced movies. But my God, his politics just spread all over every single frame of his movies. Man, this movie, The Five Bloods, is so political. There are so many jabs at the president. Man, if you had any doubts as to Spike Lee's feelings about President Trump, this movie, takes away all ambiguity pretty early on. Spike Lee's suffering from a very intense case of Trump derangement syndrome. The guy absolutely loathes Trump, and this movie is full of references as him as the Klansman in chief and President Fake Bone Spurs. I mean, these are ridiculous accusations and insults when, looked upon with any kind of scrutiny. I mean, before the pandemic hit, all demographics of Americans were doing better than ever in almost all statistical avenues. So I don't get this insistence that the man is a racist when he created the greatest economy the country has ever had. And that rising tide lifted all ships of all demographics. Everyone was doing better until the pandemic hit, which was a, unforeseen circumstance that, is nobody's fault. Nobody in America's fault. But it's unbelievable how political this film is. But hey, freedom of speech, Spike Lee's allowed to put whatever he wants in his movies, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with left-wingers making left-wing movies. That's the beauty of free speech. The problem is when conservatives try to do the same thing, they get shut down. That's the unfair part. That's the frustrating part. Not that there are left-wing movies. I'm not frustrated that Spike Lee has made a left-wing film. I'm frustrated that if a conservative tried to make a movie as conservative as this film is left-wing, then it would be banned and shouted down and be called offensive and blah, 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 blah. Everything's got to be cancelled now that is in any way, shape or form offensive to what? To the left? I mean, almost everything the left believes and says and does is offensive to the right. We're not saying your entire existence got to be censored and cancelled out. So, anyway, I've got to review this movie, don't I? Instead of going off on a tangent and a rant there. But as I was saying, this movie is very, very ideological. And it's a shame because the story in itself was interesting. These 4 Vietnam veterans, they reunite after 50 odd years to go and find the lost gold that they had left in Vietnam back in the late 60s, early 70s. Great premise. And it looks like it's shot in Vietnam, in location. I don't know if it was or not. There's parts of Queensland, which is up in northern Australia, that look very much like Vietnam. They could have filmed it there for all I know. But the acting was superb, especially from the man who played Paul, Mr. Delroy Lindo. He's a great actor. I've seen this guy in so many movies, usually plays sort of supporting characters, but he absolutely stole the show in this movie. Just a standout performance. It was so intense, funny at the same time, and you see him slowly sort of devolve into madness. And of course, he's the Trump supporting character of the four buddies, wearing his MAGA hat. That was one of the highlights of the movie too. Seeing a MAGA hat in a film, like, you never see that. And I love the MAGA hat, the Make America Great Again hat. And it was like a central point, but Spike Lee was trying to make it into a negative thing. And, he had the Trump supporting character be the most unhinged, crazy person out of the lot. But the thing is, though, that made him the most entertaining and interesting character in the entire movie. And so he's pretty much the only reason why I wanted to keep watching, to find out what the hell was going to happen to Paul's character. And so that's a testament to the acting, and I guess the writing of the character, in terms of his dialogue and the way his intensity, because I think it's obvious that they made him crazy just to insult Trump supporters. But hey, that's their ideology coming through in the film, and they're free to do that. And I didn't find the movie offensive or anything like that. I just thought that it was pretty stupid. The parts where they were trying to be political, I thought, was stupid and ignorant and foolish, but doesn't matter. I still found the movie entertaining despite all that. The cinematography was great. The pacing for the most part was good. I'd say there were bits where it dragged. There were some great intense action scenes, some great moments where there was just the characters together interacting. But man, there were some bits that just dragged on. It was 2.5 hours long. It probably could have been a 2-hour movie easily and still have included everything that they wanted to include in it. Some of the supporting characters were a bit annoying, like the activist sort of, those Frenchy people, the Frenchy girl and her buddies. They were removing the landmines, which, that's a noble cause and all that, but they just came across as condescending European pricks. Especially the guy got blown up later. What's with everyone getting blown up by landmines in this movie as well? Fucking hell. Yeah, so every second character gets bloody blown up by a landmine. Actually, I'm exaggerating. I think it's only 2 people. But it felt like it was happening all the time. It felt like every second scene someone was getting bloody blown to smithereens. I really enjoyed the scene where Delroy Lindo's character, Paul, his son, David, who is a bit of a whiny, like, annoying sort of character, but he steps on a landmine by accident, and they have to save him. They have to pull him off it, tie a rope around him and yank him off it. I thought that was a pretty good scene. I enjoyed that. And I think it was reminiscent of, I had been told of a scene in a World War II film where a guy steps on a landmine and they get one of the soldiers in the team in the squadron is a NFL player, and they get him to tackle the guy off the landmine to save his life, because you can run and hit him fast enough that he can clear the explosion. And I remember my dad telling me about that when I was a kid, but he didn't remember what the movie was called, and there was no internet then, so we couldn't look it up, and he didn't remember who was in it, so we were never able to find that movie. I could probably dig and find it now, but that scene triggered that memory I had as a kid of hearing about that movie, where they had to get him off the landmine without it hurting him. So I thought that scene was pretty intense as well, and there were some nice father-son moments between Paul and his son, David, in this, but then in the end, they just had Paul go completely insane, disown his son, because, he was the alpha male of the team, and he took command and control pretty early on. And he was in full command of the team. Everyone was doing whatever he said, because they were sort of afraid of him until they all, backstabbed him and turned on him because he was going a bit crazy. But like I said earlier, I think they made him deliberately be the only insane person in this film, because obviously Trump supporters are all insane in Spike Lee's worldview. So that's how that came through in the film, I think, from my perspective. That's how it seemed. And so I feel the movie was just overly political for me. but I was still able to enjoy the enjoyable moments, and there were quite a few. I guess the action scene was great as well. I enjoyed that when they were confronted by the Vietnamese guys, and they had to shoot their way out of a trap. And it was also nice to see Jean Reno in this as well. I love him. He's one of the better French actors. I loved his 90s films like Ronin and The Professional, and in the first Mission Impossible movie. He was great in all of those. So it was a bit weird to see him in this. He looked really old and bloated. And then towards the third act of the movie, he's like wearing a MAGA hat because he takes it off Paul's character after they capture Paul. And so it's a bit weird seeing him wearing that hat, especially as his character is like an America-hating, typical Frenchie. And Paul's character was great because early on in the movie, when they're talking to Jean Reno's character, he just lets him have it. He's like, "We saved your ass in World War II," and it was. I liked Paul's character. He didn't take shit from anybody. He was the only Trump supporter, and the whole movie universe was like written to shit on his character because he was the Trump supporter. And so everyone was giving him shit and telling him to take his hat off and, why did he vote for him and all that. And his attitude was just like, fuck you. Get fucked. You don't like my opinions, you can piss off. And I liked that, that devil may care attitude that he sort of had about that. He wasn't afraid of, offending other people's sensibilities. He wanted to stand up for what he believed in. And so that was cool. Although they wrote him as a horrifically bad father to David. But again, I think that was Spike Lee's ideology coming through there, wanting to paint him in as negative light as he could while maintaining his character as being entertaining. And I tell you what, he wrote that line pretty damn well, because Paul's character was damn well entertaining, even though he was portrayed as being an insane person suffering from extreme PTSD. And even though the other veterans all were in the same war as well, they were all there together and saw all the same horrors, Paul was the only one who was like cracking under the pressure of the PTSD. The other guys were all completely level-headed and fine. None of them had any psychological issues because they were the non-Trump supporters. This is just, to me, there was no subtlety to the political overtones in this movie. It was just like smashing you on the head with a hammer. Trump supporters are crazy. That's what I feel like the message of this movie was. Oh, and I've got to mention, what is with the... I like that it had these flashback scenes and the screen would narrow and you'd get some grain on the film to make it look like it was shot in the late 60s, early 70s on an old camera. That was cool. But for some reason... the main four guys still look like old men during the flashback sequences. So they didn't put makeup on them. They didn't make them de-age them in any way, shape, or form. And I don't understand why they didn't. They had this, because towards the end of the film they show a picture of the guys, and they had de-aged them with CGI, with a young-looking Chadwick Boseman, who played Storm and Norman, their mentor, and so they had the ability to make them look young, but in the flashback scenes, they didn't bother with that. What was it, too expensive? I mean, the budget was like $30 or $40 million. Surely that's enough to use a little bit of CGI, because it was just really off-putting and weird. They just looked like these geriatric old codgers with M16s. It was fucking stupid looking. It was ridiculous. They had like grey hair and they were old and out of breath and they're running around like in the middle of a firefight against the Viet Cong. That was a weird stylistic, artistic choice. I don't know if that's what he was intentionally going for, wanting them to still look old. I don't know why he did that, but he did anyway. And it's a choice I don't understand. There's a lot of choices in this film I don't understand. But hey, check it out. If you're on the left, you're probably going to enjoy this movie. If you hate Trump, you're probably going to enjoy this movie. But yeah, for me, it was just full of ridiculous cliches and over the top, anti-Trump political statements that were just ridiculous and fall apart on any kind of scrutiny. Spike Lee's entitled to his crazy opinions, even though I think he's pushing racial divisions and stupid identity politics that doesn't help anybody, just hinders. But hey, he's free and entitled to that opinion, just as I am free and entitled to my opinion to review and critique this movie. And that's what this is. So I think I'll sum it up by saying the true meaning of this movie that I got from it was that MAGA hat survived everything. All right, it survived the jungles of the extreme jungle conditions of Vietnam. It survived firefights. It survived being on the head of an evil Jean Reno. It survived being stolen by the Vietnamese militia guys. It survived everything. That hat could not be destroyed. And what I took from it was that this was symbolic that MAGA cannot be destroyed. Okay? So Spike Lee inadvertently, in my opinion, all right, had a little pro-MAGA element to the film. And he didn't even know it. Anyway, I'm just trying to find a diamond in the rough here, something positive to pull out of this movie, all right? Apart from the fact that, technically it was a pretty good achievement in filmmaking for the most part, the acting, the cinematography, all that stuff. But yeah, just had this huge political, ideological baggage weighing it down for me that stopped me from being able to, really enjoy the film. But hey, Spike Lee, I've seen some of his other films. I saw Black Klansman. That's the same sort of thing, hyper political movie, but it was still entertaining at the same time and had good acting in it, and entertaining characters. So he can make an entertaining movie. I'd probably say the best movie of his I've seen was that Summer of Sam. It's a bit old now. It's like 20 years old or something, but I found that movie to be pretty suspenseful and tense and pretty well done as well. But I haven't seen it for a while, so it'd be interesting to revisit that and see how ideological that movie is, because he just can't help himself. It's in everything, this guy. But like I said, he's free to do that, and I'm free to shit on it. But it's funny that he tries to portray Trump, I guess, as being anti-black and as the mainstream black position being anti-Trump. And I think it would surprise a lot of people how much support Trump actually has in the black community. And the thing is, supporting Trump nowadays is a dangerous thing to do for your career and your livelihood and your life even. You can't wear a MAGA hat in public without being attacked. That's the reality of things. Not just in the United States, even in other countries. All right, it's become very dangerous to be a vocal and out and proud supporter of his. So I think he has probably a lot more support in the black community than people realize, and people just keep it on the down low and don't talk about it. And his polling is starting to show that, especially amongst minority communities. And I think people will be surprised at moving forward how much support he actually has, how much clandestine support he has from people who are just too afraid to vocalize it and be open about their support. And so, I think lefties like Spike Lee live in a Hollywood bubble and, a social media bubble where they think all their friends agree with them and everyone they know agrees with them. So that must be the consensus view of the world. Well, elections around the Western world say otherwise. They have been trending conservative for years now. So the general populace seems to be more leaning towards the right, or at least towards the center, away from the far left. And so it's funny that he puts a movie out there like this thinking everyone's just going to agree with that. Yeah, the social media bubble will. But a lot of people will watch this and just sort of groan and cringe, I think, like I did for large chunks of this movie. Anyway, I guess there's not much more to say. I'll leave it there. Thanks for listening this far into my rambling review. If I've said anything to upset or offend anyone's sensibilities, then, you're probably not going to enjoy my other videos, but thanks for coming along for the ride anyway. So please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Take care. be good, and I'll see yous later.